Looking for something to read? Well, these are the books that I've written. Hop on down to the description to find the Amazon links for all 4 of them, and keep your eyes open for more in the future. With that said, on to the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and this is just sort of a little interlude bit, if you will, between parts of the SHIN vs. GOJIRA series, because I wanted to address a couple of things about the Godzilla video in particular that I probably could have been a bit clearer on, or that were brought up later in comments that I would like to address. Now, to start off with, I want to talk about something that, even I admit, I completely glossed over in the Godzilla video, largely because I felt there were other things that needed more focus on. And that is how some people who defend Shin Godzilla will argue that Godzilla's portrayal is accurate to how real animals behave. The criticism you may know is that Shin Godzilla, the actual Shin iteration of Godzilla, is largely static, immobile. He just sort of slowly moves one step at a time and barely reacts to anything at all, to the point where when he actually does have a reaction to something, it feels like it comes out of nowhere and doesn't have any reason to exist. The common counter-argument I've seen to defend that choice is that it is realistic because Godzilla is based on more primitive sea creatures that are not mammalian and therefore not as expressive, don't have as high of a brain function, don't have expressive facial muscles. So naturally, Godzilla is not going to be as expressive, therefore it is realistic, therefore the movie is brilliant, and I'm a moron. So there are actually 2 counter-arguments I would like to give to this. 2 separate ones, but they are both equally true in my opinion. Now, the first counter-argument is that while we might be able to say that animals have different ways of reacting to things, in reality, Godzilla is not a real creature. He is a fictional creature, and as a fictional creature, it is not inappropriate for the rules to be bent slightly for him, especially if it requires him to somehow emote in a way that the audience can understand without needing to have it spelled out for us. This is not uncommon, really. Look at the other most popular giant monster in the world, King Kong. Compare how he expresses himself in the movies to how real gorillas express themselves. You will find that even in the Peter Jackson version, which is the most gorilla-like King Kong has ever been, he still has moments where they cheat a little bit and have him be a bit more anthropomorphized for the sake of getting across the way he feels. Again, he's the most naturalistic, realistic, whatever term you want to use, istic version of that character, but they still took liberties, because Kong is not actually a real variety of gorilla. He's a made-up variety of gorilla. They're allowed to take those liberties. We can also actually see it in Jurassic Park with the velociraptors. There are moments where these creatures, who being dinosaurs are the definition of primitive, and of course they are reptiles who are not supposed to have expressive faces, there are still moments though when the raptors have very expressive faces. They go by very briefly, but they are there. The one that sticks out the most to me comes at the end of the kitchen scene. Lex and Tim have locked that one raptor in the freezer and are on their way out. The other raptor that knocked itself out by running into the cabinets gets up, watches them leave, and you see its eyes narrow and its lips curl into a snarl where it goes as it watches them. And the camera even zooms in on it. You cannot miss it. If this were 100% realistic, the raptor probably shouldn't have been able to do that, even by the standards of the time. Modern day, with the more bird-like model of the raptor, definitely couldn't happen. But this raptor still has a facial expression that says, "Now it's personal," or "I am not letting you get away." Whatever you choose to read into it, it's still along the same line. So, yeah, like I said, liberties taken. Of course, as I pointed out in the past, Jurassic Park raptors are also highly fictionalized versions of those creatures, to the point where you could argue they are a completely made-up species specifically for that film, but I don't want to necessarily get into that argument again. The point is, in the realm of film, which is a visual medium, If you've got a character that is non-verbal, as in he cannot speak, that character needs to express itself in other ways, even if it is a monster or a creature of some sort. And that usually comes through expressiveness in other forms, sometimes through the face, sometimes through the way the body moves, and that's acceptable. You're not going to hear anyone deride those brief shots of the raptors being extra expressive in Jurassic Park, because most people probably don't even consciously register it. It just is such a natural part of that film that you probably didn't even really think about that moment at first until I brought it up just now, most likely. And now that I have brought it up, I'm sure somebody's going to come in and say it was a horrible scene for doing that, but whatever, I can't control that sort of thing. But I did say there were two counter-arguments, did I not? Let's assume just for a moment that the direction that Shin Godzilla wanted to take was to not take those kind of liberties. All right, fine, Godzilla is a very unrealistic creature, but they still wanted to depict it as a real animal would be, as much as they could given the kind of thing he is. So they were aiming for that sort of thing, and reality says that animals of that sort do not express themselves in ways humans can understand. Or do they? This actually requires me to encourage you to go down to the description and find a link to another video you can watch. This video just popped up in my recommendations a couple days ago, and I don't know why YouTube thought I would like this video, but I am glad I found it, because this provides all of the counter-argument I really need. It is a video of a scuba diver. Technically, there are two scuba divers in this particular sequence, but one of them is holding the camera and it's filming the other one, who is the subject. The scuba diver swims up to a craggy underwater rock formation, and out from one of the holes in this rock pops the head of a moray eel to see what's going on. And moray eels are of that particular variety of primitive sea creature that Shin defenders will so often compare Shin Goji to. They have large, unblinking eyes, mouths that can only open and close, they can't smile, they can't frown. Eels are just unexpressive, primitive creatures, right? Well, as the eel is looking around to see what this diver is doing, the diver reaches out and starts petting and scratching it like it's a dog. And to my surprise, and to the surprise of anyone who will watch it, the eel likes it. How can you tell the eel likes it, mind you? I mean, if it's unexpressive, how can we actually tell? Because of its body language, the way it moves. It leans into the diver's hand because it's appreciating the way this feels. As he moves his hand around, it adjusts where its body is so he can reach under its chin or the other side or anywhere he wants it to be petted. It's obvious to anyone who watches it. It's not having any sort of complex thoughts about how this is in the style of a particular French massage or something. It's just thinking, ooh, this feels nice. I like it. Now pet me here and now here. You can tell just from the way it moves. It is expressing itself. And there you have it. That is all the counter-argument I need. The primary argument for Shin being an unresponsive, unreactive, practically immobile creature is that it's realistic, but reality itself says no. That sort of thing is actually unrealistic and unnatural. Godzilla should have been able to express himself in some other kind of way. Maybe not have him smile or frown or do stuff like that, but he still could have moved in some particular way. And no, the flopping around like a boneless rubber chicken in the first landfall is not the same thing, because it doesn't feel natural either. A real animal would be trying to keep its head above the debris that's in front of it, not flopping around and whacking its head against everything from the ground to the walls to the objects in front of it and everything else. That's not natural. This is unrealistic, no matter how you look at it. So I'm ready to put that particular one to bed. But then, of course, we have the counter argument, where people will claim that Shin Godzilla is just meant to be completely unknowable, which is why he doesn't have those responses, why he is so unreactive and still most of the time. Except we still come back to the song Who Will Know, which implies that there is something to know about him. Yet what the song conveys does not jive with what we see on the screen. So which is it? If the song is meant to be taken as our insight, then Godzilla cannot be called unknowable in this movie, even though what the song conveys doesn't line up. If Godzilla is meant to be unknowable, why is that song there? There's no way the two things can coexist. I would also like to touch a little bit more on the idea of Godzilla's motivation in the movie, because I did address it to a certain degree, but I think I can probably explain it a little bit clearer. Like I said, there are theories put forward as to why Godzilla has come on land, but they are all quickly dismissed. He's not coming to find food on land because he doesn't eat anymore. He's not looking for more nuclear energy to absorb either because the nuclear energy within him is self-sustaining, so he doesn't need that. He is not uncontrollably evolving and just growing legs without meaning to, because he can deliberately control his evolution. Every possibility that's put forward is just as quickly removed as not an option. And that in and of itself is not a problem. Putting forward a theory that is incorrect only to have it taken off the table is not bad writing in and of itself. The problem is that no new theories are put forward once those other theories are taken away. So we're left with a big question mark. People have run out of guesses, even though Godzilla is still there and still clearly looks like he's heading somewhere. But the only reason we have left is one that isn't part of the story. It's part of the meta story, which is that Godzilla has to come on shore so the plot can happen. That's a perfectly fine reason if you're making a screwball comedy, but not if you're making a serious political thriller. Quick aside, based on that, I have seen people argue that Shin Godzilla is meant to be a political satire in the vein of Dr. Strangelove. I don't see it. My understanding is that comedies and political satires like Dr. Strangelove are supposed to be funny, you know, have jokes in them that make the audience laugh. But Shin Godzilla really doesn't have a lot of humor in it. The only two things I can think of that are clearly meant to be jokes are a moment where someone comments on Rondo Yaguchi's body odor being pungent because he's been working for so long without taking a shower, and a moment where Kyoko asks if there's any place to shop because she's bored with all of this political stuff. Those are amusing little bits of levity, I guess, but they're not really laugh-out-loud funny, and they don't represent the majority of what's on screen. The rest of this movie, I'm pretty sure we're not meant to be laughing at. I mean, I don't think we were supposed to laugh when the images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are flashed on the screen before our eyes, because, you know, that would be kind of a sick thing to laugh at. But anyway, that's beside the point. Getting back on track, I do still think it was a huge mistake to never give us so much as a hint of what Godzilla was doing, where he was going, what his plan might have been. I mean, first of all, that goes against basic storytelling, because the whole reason conflict exists in a story is because you have a protagonist and an antagonist. Each one has a goal. Those goals cannot be realized at the same time. They cannot coexist. Therefore, conflict. Godzilla has no stated goal. Really, Rondo Yaguchi has no stated goal either, other than stop Godzilla. Why stop Godzilla? Because, well, yeah, he's causing destruction, but why is Godzilla causing destruction? It's a very, 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 very basic idea of how to generate conflict, and it doesn't really feel like one that actually has stakes to it. Other than, if Godzilla keeps going, there will be destruction in a very straight line. More so than that, though, the fact that they left it completely open-ended, you know, here, let me give you another counterexample from a different movie, The Great Buddha Arrival. I reviewed it, follow the links if you're curious, but The Great Buddha Arrival probably took a lot of inspiration from Shin Godzilla. Based on the number of meta references there are in that movie, I'd be more surprised if that weren't the case. Basically, once the Buddha statue gets up and starts walking around, there are three questions everyone asks. Why did it get up and start walking? Where is it going? And what will happen when it gets there? By the end, by the time we get to the climax, all three of those questions have been answered. Plenty of people have been speculating throughout the film, and those speculations turn out to be varying degrees of right and wrong, but by the time we actually get to the climax, all three questions have been answered. Not necessarily clearly, because a lot is still open to interpretation. I will admit that I'm still kind of confused by what happens, and I'm still trying to figure stuff out. But the three questions, nevertheless, are answered. Eventually, the statue gets to a place where it stops moving, so this is where it was going. Once it is there, something starts happening, something that can only be described as supernatural. So that's what will happen, and we have to assume that getting up and going to this place is the reason the statue got up in the first place. So there you have it. All three questions answered. Not necessarily the way you might have expected, and not necessarily in a way that's just crystal clear, but still answered. That doesn't happen in Shin Godzilla. We still have the questions of why is he on land, where is he going, what's going to happen when he gets there. They are not answered. That just winds up being a frustration, and there's really no reason why they couldn't have answered those questions. They could have easily worked something into the dialogue. They could have said, hey, if he keeps traveling along this route, there is something here, and we don't want this to be destroyed if he's going there. It might not even need to be the place he's actually headed to. It could just be something that's in his way that he's not likely to go around. But even that's not incorporated into the plot. Personally, I can't think of a single reason why something like that wasn't addressed. But, you know, I wasn't the one who made the movie. And that leads us to the fan theories. And look, I don't want to deride anyone for having fan theories or personally accepting them as the answers that they think are the best ones. But a fan theory is not necessarily the answer, because we have to actually go on what is in the film itself to decide what the answer is. And the film, as I keep saying, doesn't give us enough information to figure out what the answer is. One person I had a little back and forth with, a good back and forth with, mind you, in the comments of the Godzilla video, said that he believes Godzilla is heading on land because he wants to spawn. That's what the little humanoids coming out of his tail at the very end were supposed to be. He was heading to his ancient breeding grounds so that he could reproduce, essentially, like a salmon swimming upriver. Now, this guy clearly thinks that is the answer, and if he likes that answer, good on him. I do not think it is the answer, because it raises even more questions, like, why would a sea creature that has spent its entire life in the ocean and whose species has been in the ocean for millennia, presumably at least, why would that thing go on land to spawn, whether it was mutating or not? And we also have another issue in that there is another very popular fan theory that the humanoids coming out of the tail that we see frozen at the end is not because Godzilla was planning to release those, it was because it was a last-ditch effort for Godzilla to have a piece of him break off and survive as the coagulate was turning him into a giant statue. So, again, we see something where these two explanations cannot both be true at the same time. If Godzilla was always planning to release those humanoids, then it could not have been a last-ditch effort. If Godzilla was releasing those humanoids as the last-ditch effort to survive, he couldn't have been planning to release them prior. But both camps will tell you that that is the truth. Therein lies the problem. There are too many answers, and not enough evidence in the movie to go on. In the end, I'm just left with the feeling that Shin Godzilla is a blank slate. In fact, his presence in other media, where he winds up filling more traditional roles, further reinforces that idea that he's a blank slate. Nothing but a design that, yes, looks very clear, but has nothing beneath its very bizarre surface. Think of it this way. The 1973 Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Megalon is perhaps the friendliest, most heroic Godzilla of them all. He has a very Muppet-like appearance that's round and big eyes and looks very endearing, very child-friendly. He happily goes into battle alongside his robot buddy Jet Jaguar to save the world and all the people on the world. He is the hero, undeniably. On the other end of the spectrum, you have GMK Godzilla from 2001. A creature that is fierce and menacing and vengeful and cruel, sadistic even. His design radiates wickedness and anger. You cannot switch those two Godzillas out in their respective movies. GMK Godzilla cannot fill the heroic role in Godzilla vs. Megalon, and the Megalon Godzilla cannot be the menacing villain of GMK. Those two are established, clear-cut characters. Different portrayals of the same creature, but still very distinct from each other. If Shin Godzilla really had his own personality, then he should not be able to fill another role. And yet, we have Godzilla vs. Evangelion, that theme park thing where he basically winds up filling an early Showa role where he shows up to fight Shin Ghidorah. Or we have the Shin Japan Heroes Project, where he's heroically charging into battle alongside Ultraman, Shinji Ikari, and Kamen Rider. He shouldn't be able to fill that role so easily, and yet he does. He even goes full Megazord with the other heroes, because now he's a hero, and not an antagonist who's constantly in pain, or trying to reproduce, or has some unspecified goal we're not meant to know, or whatever the heck he's supposed to be. See, this is my big frustration. Shin Godzilla truly is a blank slate. A lot of people can read traits into him, because there are no traits to extract from him. He's tabula rasa, and not in a good way. So, just wanted to address all of those things. I don't know if they make a difference to anyone or not, but I felt like they were worth talking about either way. So, on to part 3, where we move past the character stuff and the kaiju stuff, and start getting into the much trickier areas. Until such time as that happens, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Thank you all for watching. If you want to see us keep doing what we're doing, you might consider doing all the usual YouTube things, as well as hopping down to the description to find links to DeviantArt, Patreon, Twitter, and links for the different books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Your support is naturally appreciated. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.